Alright, so here we are at the early access of Assetto Corsa Evo. So let's talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. There's quite a bit to discuss. Well, maybe not that much actually, but let's get to it. Alright, and before we actually get started, here's a quick summary of everything in the video so you can just make your decision now if you want without going in depth. The game has an okay selection of cars, with some cars locked behind an online-only model to be in place. Now this could change, so be wary of that. The cars on the other hand all feel great except for three in my opinion: the Ferrari, the AMG and the Porsche. The weather effects are pretty awesome. There are only 5 tracks, with the performance varying on each track after each update. That can be a bit much for some people. The Driver Academy is not available yet, even though I'm sure it was supposed to be. Oh yeah, also the VR just doesn't work at the moment. Now I haven't tested it myself, but you don't have to take my word for it, just have a look at the Steam reviews. And the graphic settings I'd say are just average at this point. It's nothing special, but it's nothing too bad either. The free roam is not in the game, but is planned for a later date. Now this was mentioned, so it's really not a surprise, so keep that in mind. Visual and audio cues are quite lackluster, even for early access and even for the simplest things. The replay functions are pretty good for early access, with a rather cinematic feel to them, as you can see. But the replay functions are limited to just a pause and play button. I don't think you can export it. Also, after going back to the original Assetto Corsa, this game, Evo, can feel more refined with the physics, but certainly feels better with the views, the HUD and cameras, which of course is a good thing. Man, the original Assetto Corsa just is a handful to navigate. I forgot how bad it is until I went back, and man, it was frustrating right away. The AI at this point is just A. The physics and time models feel great overall, but of course tuning is needed and not everything is there. But again, that's to be expected, it's early access. The price is rather steep for all of this at this point, but since it's cheaper in my country, I decided to get it anyway. It feels somewhat worth it. Well, maybe not that worth it. No, EA or early access does not mean you get early access to a complete game. It means, and this is very important, that you are part of a hopefully fluid development process with an unfinished, in this case very unfinished game. Do keep that in mind. You should buy the game now if you want to support Kunos and actually help them, as opposed to whine about everything after every update. And of course, stay away from buying the game if you want something relatively playable right now. Alright, and first things first, this is what you're greeted with when you start up the game, and it is somewhat informative. I wish it was a little bit more interactive, but hey, at least it's better than nothing. So yeah, that's what you get up first. After that, you can press continue, and you'll also notice that you're online and then quickly offline. Apparently that is a thing right now. We'll discuss that in a second as well. But also, have a look at these menus. These are menus from basically the first Assetto Corsa, and they completely suck. I mean, they already developed the menus in Assetto Corsa Competizione, so why not just use the same menus? Well, not the same menus, but roughly the same layout. It's a weird way to get introduced to the game, but then again, I wasn't expecting anything amazing with the menus because it's Assetto Corsa. Okay, but let's go on over to the vehicles. We'll be going to garage, and after that we can go on over to the actual cars here, and as you can see, quite a few. Now, if we go to all, we can then scroll down. I don't know why they did this. I feel it's kind of weird. They should have made it like some sort of way to actually select the colors as opposed to showing every single livery on every single car. It's a bit weird. Okay, and going back, as you can see, most things are grayed out. You know, you've got garage, dealership, customized vehicle. The Driving Academy, however, is also grayed out now. I'm pretty sure this was supposed to be part of the early access, not the free roam mode that was said to be released later on, but this should have been here. In fact, I think that was kind of compulsory, but yeah, it's not here. We also have this driver profile thing. You can create your profile. I'm not sure if I saved mine wrong, but I'm pretty sure it just doesn't save. I'll try it again, but I don't think it does. And then of course we have settings. We'll go through these a little bit later as well. But yeah, that is kind of the menus for now. Nothing special, nothing crazy. Alright, so onto the cars finally. And yes, all 20 are accessible right now. There's that whole online offline thing, but we won't get into that just yet because it doesn't apply right now. But right now, like I said, you've got access to all 20. They all feel great, or rather they mostly feel great, and there's only 3 that I'm not a fan of. That will be the Ferrari, the Porsche and the GT, the AMG. I'm not the biggest fan of these cars because they feel dumbed down, they feel muted, they feel like they shouldn't. They're very, very heavy. The Porsche is just not as nippy as it should be. It does not turn when it should. The Ferrari brakes like a brick. It is really bad. The AMG seems a little bit better, but again, not as good as all the other cars. All the other cars, however, feel amazing. I tried all of them except for one of the alphas. I forgot which one it is, but the Giulia feels amazing, the Golf feels awesome, all the BMs feel great. Everything, like I said, is great except for those 3 cars. So yeah, that is pretty much it. One of the other problems I would have with the cars is that they're a little too easy to correct. So if you are oversteering wildly, you can quickly steer in the other direction and correct that. But yeah, the cars are really good overall. I like the track selection, but the tracks themselves can vary in your experience with them depending on whether you're using AI or if it's just you hot lapping. The frames can really take a dip. Now, when the game first started, the frames were okay, but after the first update, or the second update rather, we're on 0.12, I think. Yeah, it gets very choppy on Suzuka and Laguna Seca. Oh, and the tracks. The tracks, by the way, are Laguna Seca, we've got Suzuka, we've got Brands Hatch, we've got Mount Panorama, the other one, Imola. I think they're okay, but yeah, like I said, the performance on them can really vary. But yeah, compared to the original Assetto Corsa, which had almost 10 tracks, yeah, this is a bit of a letdown, especially given that they don't all work as well as they should. Now moving on from that, we've got weather. The weather effects are pretty awesome. I feel like the fog, the rain, all of that is just awesome. I mean, have a look at the rain on the hood of this car as I'm driving by. Now they also say that the rain will gather in certain areas, and it actually does. And if you go over those areas with your car, you will definitely feel it. You can actually feel it. But again, it's a mixed bag, because if you go into third-person view with the car, you can see that the rain effects or the water effects of the car moving out, it's obviously a placeholder, but it looks pretty horrible. It's really bad. And speaking of visual cues, and that's what that is, the visual cues are not there. In other words, if you crash your car, there is no visual cues, no paint, no dents. There are just none of those visual cues to suggest that your car is in limp home mode. Now they do have a HUD over here, a little mini HUD, and I love this mini HUD over here. We'll speak about that a little bit later. But for this little part here, they do give you a visual cue as to your car being damaged. So it first starts off pretty translucent, and the more you damage it, it'll start off gray, and then move on to like a red, yellow, orange, and it'll start flashing. So I think that's pretty great. But again, other visual cues like the water from the tires just look horrendous. When you're trying to drift a car or when you're turning in too hard, sometimes that smoke will give you a little bit of an indicator to say that, hey, you're actually sliding the car, lay off a little bit. But you don't really see that here, right? Even with the Camaro, which is a very powerful car, the Camaro feels great as well. When you're trying to drift it, you don't really see that smoke, and the smoke really adds to the visual cue. And speaking of other visual cues, you actually have people moving around this time. In ACC, the people don't actually move around. They were basically sprites that were facing the camera as you went by. But I feel like here, they're making them move around because remember, there's going to be a free roam. And I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure there'll be people moving around in that free roam. So it makes sense for them to do that. We also have small details like birds flying, which I thought was kind of cool. And yeah, that's kind of about it for visual cues. Again, another mixed bag. There's some really good ones, some really bad ones, and then some where you're just like, why don't we have this or why don't we have that? Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. And speaking of all over the place, we have sounds. But the thing with sound is, if it's really good or really bad, you will notice it. If it's just there and it's doing its job, you don't really care too much about it. But if it's really good or really bad, and it's really bad in this case, you will notice it. Well, they're not bad, it's okay. It's nothing special. Yeah, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's bad. And with the cars, the sounds are just off. They sound like they're too high or too low, or when you rev a car that shouldn't be revving that high. Like the Fiat, for example. Should it really be that loud? And of course, when you're in the car does sound different from when you're outside of the car, but not all the views have different sounds. I understand that that's a little bit of a thing there, but when you're on the hood, as opposed to when you're in third person, it should be a different sound, but it actually isn't. Which can be a little bit jarring, but again, unless you're switching views over and over again, you're not really going to notice it, but that's one thing. Again, some cars sound really good, and some cars just sound weird. And I also feel like it's too loud. It's like they push the sound up on the cars, for all of them. There are times when they get it right. For example, when you're in the rain and you're moving through, it actually feels like the rain is right there with you. But also the thing they get wrong is that the rain feels like it's inside the car, not outside the car. Alright, so just before I wrap up here, let's go through some of the things that I mentioned I'll talk about, and in this case, the mini HUD. I really love this little gadget here at the end of your screen on the bottom right that tells you how fast you're going, what your acceleration is, you know, the PSI, also the damage that you're dealing or receiving rather from your crashes. But also, as you accelerate, you notice that it is quite choppy. The HUD itself, or the accelerator itself, is actually kind of laggy, which is kind of annoying. Now, I don't know, it especially does this with the Porsche. I don't know if the Porsche is supposed to lag with its performance. I don't think so, but it does that a lot, so that's also something to be careful of. Alright, so the online servers, right now the servers can't really be online because apparently they're crashing all the time or something of that sort. I'm not entirely sure about that. But playing online and offline gives you a different set of cars that you have access to, which of course is going to upset a lot of people. I don't know how this is going to work, and the same thing with the mods. I believe that they are controlling the mods, and depending on what they want or don't want, I'm talking about Kunos here, so you can't just go in and mod. Again, I'm not entirely sure on that. Alright, so up next we have a few of the settings, just the track settings. There are things that you can change here, and a cool thing that you can do is change the time of day via 5-minute increments. Racing at night looks epic, racing during sunset or sunrise also looks pretty awesome. Racing during midday doesn't look very good at all in these games, they never really have, but especially with this game it doesn't look too great. Again, there are a lot of settings here, especially with the weather. You can't fine-tune every single thing, but again, that's to be expected. For early access, I think it's pretty good. You can also tune your garage, just kind of go via the time of day. You can have it rain, you can have it at night. So you've got the lights on here. That also looks really awesome. You can move the car around, or move the camera around rather. Again, not really important, but it's there, so there it is. Another thing that you can do, and there are a lot of settings for remapping your controller. Now with the first update, you could tell where your controller, what was being mapped, because they gave you numbers for that controller parts and for your keyboard. But now you don't know if it's mapped. There's only a gray bar around something to tell you that something has been mapped, but you don't know what's been mapped to what. So unfortunately that has been done. And yeah, the mapping is pretty good. You can change a bunch of things. You can also say what setting is for that mapping. So for example, if you click it, what happens? You have to hold it for it to activate. Once you click it, is it a sort of flash thing that happens? That there is really good. But also another thing that they got wrong is if I press down to look back, and I just said that just to see what would happen, while I'm going through the menus and I press down, I'm also looking back. So they haven't sorted out the menu navigation and the car navigation, or the view navigation, so they're kind of interlocked, which is a bit weird. So again, I'm on my controller, and if you change these dynamic settings over here, you can actually move really slow or really fast when your driver is turning the steering wheel. It's not as sensitive as ACC. ACC, you could turn the steering wheel like the speed of light. It was super fast. I get that it's unrealistic, but they had it, so why not? And one last thing, yeah, the AI. The AI is very at this point, right? It's very artificial. Clearly, it is artificial intelligence. They're not doing anything special, but they also don't really acknowledge you being on the track a lot of the times. They will sometimes just knock right into you, and they'll also stay in line with one another. It's like the drivers are synchronized divers, just keeping in line with each other. It's very comical to look at. Of course, it is early access. I wasn't expecting anything too crazy, but yeah, it is pretty lackluster. Again, this isn't their first game, it's their third game in the series, as far as I know, in their series, and they should have some sort of hold on that, shouldn't they? Alright, and just as a quick wrap up here are some pros and cons to the game. These are just some random ones given in no particular order. The bonnet view can be a bit high, but the third-person camera is an improvement over ACC. It's actually quite dynamic compared to the very stiff camera in ACC. The ideal lines in this game aren't that ideal. In fact, they just tell you where to go, but not when to brake or accelerate. The interior of the cars, however, are very well done. They actually interact with you and actually show you things as you go, like the speed or the movement or the acceleration and the braking, if the car actually does that. The dynamic weather is actually very good. Sometimes you'll be going on the first lap with scattered clouds, and by the end of the fourth or fifth lap you'll get a little bit of drizzle. That's really cool to see. The audio and visual cues are a little bit mixed. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, and sometimes they're just missing. I do like this little HUD on the corner over here, but like I said, the accelerator can be a bit jumpy. The cars all feel and look great, but the overall selection is okay. Like I said, I don't like 3 of the cars. That will be the Porsche, the AMG, and the Ferrari. The AI is not the best. In fact, it's pretty bad. The price at this amount is, or rather the price for what you get at this amount isn't all that great. I think $20 would have made far more sense for everyone. So early access content in general is just a little bit lackluster for this price. The Driving Academy cannot be accessed just yet, even though it should be accessed. The tracks are good, not great, but with varied optimization. And that also depends on the AI that you put on the track as well. The physics and tire models are great, they feel awesome. The crowds and the birds and those sort of little visual cues that you have also add to the mix there. The nighttime driving and lighting effects in general are really good. They really add to the overall feeling and it looks awesome. The menus are pretty sucky and they're not all that great to navigate or to look at. Having custom keys are great, but unfortunately you can't see what you've binded to which key because, well, that no longer shows. I think they'll update it. It's probably some sort of unfortunate mistake. And yeah, for early access, I would say it's like a 5.5 or 6 out of 10. It's really not the best. They should have been a little bit more organized with the way they roll things out and did things. And especially with the server issues, they should have kind of anticipated this because the Assetto Corsa community is not really that small anymore. Yeah, I realize that is a relatively low score, but there are times when I play this game and I'm just so into it. It really has the bones of something good to come, but really that is in the future. Right now, unfortunately, you will be driving along and there will be frame stutters which will pull you back into reality and have you realize, yep, it's still early access, or an AI will just crash into you. So it is still a very enjoyable game to drive around in, but right now, like I said, there are far too many problems, but they will be fixed hopefully by June, July, and I feel like they have a long way to go. Remember, the game will be releasing at its full state at the end of the year, and I don't think they're going to quite make, I mean, they could, you never know, but yeah, I just feel it might be a little bit early. I can maybe think early next year, might be still cutting it close, but yeah, the end of this year, I don't feel that's a good idea, but again, we'll see as we go. This is just the first iteration of the game. We have no idea what will happen by June, July. But even after all that, I still believe in Kunos. Remember that they gave us Assetto Corsa and ACC, so we just have to look and see what happens. But yeah, like I said, that's pretty much my wrap up here. So like it if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments. And of course, thank you for watching.